Welcome to the In My Opinion Show with Ronald Robinson and friends, seen on the internet 24 hours, 7 days a week. You can also view us on Flint, Michigan, Comcast Cable Channel 17 every Saturday at 6 p.m. and every Wednesday at 8:30. You can also view us on Detroit, Michigan, Comcast Cable Channel 68 7 days a week. To reach us on the internet, simply go into your onto your computer and type in capital letters RBRIMO, and then go down to videos. We have a host of programming, and I think our millions of viewers out there would enjoy that. We have a special guest. We have Mr. Pastor Brian Willingham, author, poet, and one of Flint, Michigan's finest police officers. Welcome to the In My Opinion Show, Brian.
Thank you, Brother Robinson.
You don't mind if I call you Brian, do you?
Man, however, it's good.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome.
I'm honored to be here.
Brian, please share with our millions of viewers worldwide a little of your history. Who is Brian Willingham?
Well, that's always a good question. Who art thou? That's a biblical question and a sermon I posed to my congregation, in which we should know who we are. I'm first and foremost nowadays a man of God called to ministry and pastor, Charity United Methodist Church in Flint. I'm a husband and father. As you mentioned, I'm a police officer. I have dabbled in writing and activism and a number of things, and so those things I would say would be the core of who I am.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I've also seen some information that in reference to your daughter. She seems to be academically motivated.
Yeah, I've been blessed. I have 3 children I've been blessed as a parent to have 3 kids pursuing higher education and to be gainfully employed, in this society as young African Americans. I've been tremendously blessed as a father.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's talk about this. There is a disease, in my opinion, and shared by millions of others around the United States of America as it pertains to African Americans. The wanton killing of our brothers, sisters, and young adults by redneck law enforcement, predominantly white. But first, I want to read a foreword that you wrote in your book, A Soul of a Black Cop.
Mm-hmm. Is that by Dr. Cone?
Since the very beginning of American history, police-community relations have wrought with controversy. Slave patrols, a staple of oppression and brutality, controlled the daily reality of African descendants in America. The building of America through the iron fist of government action displaced the native inhabitants of North America and oppressed the white working class, who themselves become indentured servants. The result then of this manifold injustice was a revolution that produced the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Thus was born the idea that citizens of America had the right to protect themselves against unlawful government intrusion into their lives. Although these protections are in place, Americans still have suffered injustice at the hands of the government. This again gave thrust to a series of movements to secure the civil rights of various segments of American society. In contemporary society, the reality of the Rodney King incident is yet another reminder that America still struggles with the issue of police brutality. Yet these struggles are not the sole concern of African Americans. Latinos, Asian Americans, and working class whites, and now Arab Americans, are experiencing increased tensions with police. A new era of war and anti-terrorism has ushered in new types of race, class, sex, and religious profiling that continues to threaten civil liberties. As always, the response to a new type of oppression in America has been a new type of revolution. What encouraged you to write that forward?
Well, just again, when you examine, you use the word disease, and I think in terms of racism in America and race relations in the country, that it is a disease. It is a disease that goes back to the beginning of the creation of our nation and the beginning of black people's entry, or African people's entry into this country by way of slavery, and we still have some remnants, if you will, of that initial act of slavery that still play out in the society today.
Well, you would think 150 or so years later, after the emancipation, et cetera, that and with the advent of a two-time African-American president, it would seem to have gotten better, but all the statistics indicate that in terms of, in many places, race relations have taken a back seat.
Yes. I think we're in an interesting time in history in which the nation who at one time held slaves has now elected a black president. I mean, what an interesting dichotomy, if you will, in America, that we, with our legacy of slavery, would now elect an African American or an African man president. But I think this is part of the complexity of the race problem in America, is that we tend to esteem famous and rich and famous black people, and we do not realize, such as the president or the athlete or the entertainer, we tend to esteem those black people, but we don't realize it's the everyday black person that's still suffering with the ghetto, that's still suffering with the problem of the gun, the drug, the education, the employment. And so I think sometimes in this country we think that a love of, let's say, your favorite rapper or your favorite basketball player constitutes a love for black people overall, and not necessarily. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily, or the progress of a small few famous black people constitutes a progress for an entire people, not necessarily. And I think this is where some of the confusion around the issue of race relations is in our country.
Do you think that it's the portrayal on, especially on television, all right, and social media, and newsprint, has a lot of influence on our children, as well as parents in the home, because you see so many young folks identify with basketball players and actors and actresses, all right, mm-hmm. and football players. The vast majority of those young adults will never attain that. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think it's an illusion mm-hmm. that impacts the psyche of white people as well as black people, because again, we are falling in love with a glamorized image of famous and rich black people, and we mistake that love and that glamorization of those people as a love for an entire group of people. And it's just an illusion, you mm-hmm. know, that because I love Lil Wayne or Michael Jackson or James Brown or Oprah Winfrey, that I love black people. Mm-hmm. And it's just not true. When the average black person, again, in America is living in poverty, or is in prison, or is in the graveyard too soon, or is in failing schools and inner city infrastructures, or in Chicago, let's say a few years back, 500 homicides of African American people, and across the country and all the urban centers, you know, we still have high crime, high poverty rates, and yet we are living in this fascination of the famous black person as a representation of all black people. And I just think it's a terrible illusion that affects us as black people and other people outside of us who see us only through the lens of the handful of rich and famous black people. And they may lose a respect for what the average everyday black person's experience is in America.
Exactly. In your opinion, tell our viewers, what's your opinion? I mean, why is it that in our culture we have so much self-hatred?
Well, I think it goes back to the piece that you opened up. It goes back to history. We often will say, as you said, because of the passage of time, that we should be past certain historical diseases, as you mentioned, in our society. But just the passage of time alone does not heal it. Just to say, well, that was so many years ago, it does not heal that just by the passage of time alone. So I think it has a start. It's twofold. For me, the government has to, I think, hold black people in higher esteem, higher value. Again, we see an inner city that's crumbling all over this country, whether it be Flint, Michigan, or Detroit, or Milwaukee, or Chicago. America knows that there are two Americas. And yet we have no agenda. The White House, despite having a black president, does not have an urban agenda. It does not have an agenda to uplift and repair and heal those in the inner city.
Okay.
And secondly, black people, we must bear some responsibility ourselves for our own self-esteem and our own uplift of our people.
But okay, how do we manage that, or how do we go about that when 60% in many urban areas of the students never graduate from high school? Okay, well, right here in Flint, where this program originates, in talking to, I'm not going to mention any names, but these colleges, especially some of our junior colleges, not just in this area, but in other areas too, that so many of our kids, both black and white, they have to go through remedial training to get through. Now, what the hell has happened to their teaching? Okay.
Yeah,
So we have to put a lot of blame not only on the parents but the educational system as well.
Yes.
Why is it that white schools get more money than urban schools?
Well, this is the question this is a moral question, a spiritual question that I think Dr. King, Malcolm X, it's our history. It's part of black people's legacy that we question the moral and spiritual status of the country. And right now, I would just reiterate the same thing that a Dr. King or Malcolm X or civil rights legacy leaders in our country have said, that it's quite apparent that there are two Americas. There are still two Americas. Despite civil rights, despite a black man in the White House, we still live in an American society where there's two Americas. And until, from a government standpoint, that we develop the moral and spiritual fortitude to eradicate it, because we are the most powerful nation in the world, and we have every resource that we need to eliminate the ghetto, if we so choose to eliminate the ghetto. And the only reason why the ghetto and all the vestiges of the ghetto continue to exist, is because America has not decided to eliminate it. And so I would start there. And then secondly, I would say for black people, if we survive slavery without education, with less than perfect institutions and so forth and so on, we can survive now. If we found a way to nurture and support ourselves and live through the worst time in our human history, then we cannot have an excuse now for some of the things that we're doing today to ourselves.
Well, one thing that I have to point out to, or make a point of, we as a race of people cannot depend on the government for anything. Okay, it's as plain as the nose on our faces, because they are not going to help us. We have, as a race of people, we have to do this work ourselves. All right. People have called me a radical. Okay, but they call Jesus Christ a radical too. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm in good company as far as that's concerned.
Right.
Okay. And if it weren't for the children, we get back to the children again. They are our future. We can say it a million times, but if we don't put that belief in them, all right, and sustain it within them, on a daily basis, with all the other foolishness that goes on that they're encountering on TV and their friends and so on and so forth, it's up to us. Like right here in the state of Michigan, we've seen how Snyder is made it worse for mothers. All right, cutting, in terms of cutting food stamps and monetary money that used to go out to them. It's no longer it's no longer there. And I hate people saying that well, now it's gonna make these women get off their tails. All right, but when you look at the totality of everything, all right, the population in America, whites outnumber us 10-1. We're in the neighborhood of about 50 million. They're in the neighborhood of 300 million. What I try to get across to people, if you got 300 million whites and 50 million, who's on welfare the most?
True. And see, and that brings us back to the movement in the country that never happened. That Dr. King's next movement that he was going to perform was what he called the Poor People's Movement, which he was assassinated before he was able to execute it, because what you just mentioned was that there's a problem of not just race in this country, but a problem of social class and poverty. And what Dr. King was trying to move us to was away from looking at the problem solely through the lens of race and racism, but also mention what you just said, that there are millions of our white brothers and sisters that are living in abject poverty in the country as well. And so if we are lovers of justice, then none of us can afford to just see justice through our own personal situation. We have to see how the idea of justice translates to other human beings who may be suffering similar circumstances as us.
Exactly. What would you tell people, especially white people, that say, well, you got a black president, all right, there is no more race problem?
I would say that it's an illusion. Some black scholars call it the illusion of inclusion, which is, again, where you have a few black celebrities beginning with Obama or Oprah or a handful of basketball players or football players or entertainers. And sometimes these people are used to give us an illusion that the progress of black people is greater than what it actually is. Mm-hmm. Because we say, well, look at the rich rappers, or look at the LeBron James, or look at any famous black person that you can name. And so it's an illusion. It's an illusion to both people, mm-hmm. to all people, that somehow, because there's a handful of famous black people, that the status of black people somehow has improved. And the best that I can say is that go to the inner city of Chicago or Detroit or Flint, and you'll see what a true illusion that this is.
Absolutely.
And so this is a mind game and a trick, an illusion that's being played upon the psyche of all Americans, that black people again somehow have progressed because a very small percentage have been allowed some material success.
What's your thoughts on the ploys that whites use to justify killing of people of color, such as the Castle Doctrine that we have here in the state of Michigan, which allows for deadly force in one's home, vehicle, or workplace, or stand your ground law, that no individual has no duty to retreat from any place that have a right to be and may use any level of force, including lethal, if they face imminent and immediate threat of bodily harm or death.
I think the law, again, when we look at law, and the laws that we make, that we enforce, that we value, reflects our moral position and spiritual position. And again, you said we cannot depend upon government, and yet I will say, sure, we shouldn't be solely dependent upon government, but government, when you mentioned the Constitution, government has a responsibility. And it's been, again, part of our legacy as black people on the globe, whether it be Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela, that we've challenged mm-hmm. governments that they be fair.
But, we know they're not.
And we cannot continue. I don't think we can ever stop that challenge.
Right. We've got to challenge at every step of the road. Mm-hmm. All right. Because like Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass says, power begets nothing without agitation. How can we as a race of people continue to tolerate police brutality like the beatings of Rodney King and thousands of others that have not been shown the world on print, news media, news, social media, and network news? The killing of Trayvon Martin, Diallo, they shot him 49 times, the Michael Browns and others with their hands up in the air. A black boy found hanged and castrated in a tree in Mississippi. Another found dead rolled up in a carpet at a school. A sister's face blown off from simply knocking on a man's door asking for help in Dearborn, Michigan. These atrocities are not just relegated to men of color, but also women of color. This stuff is atrocious and endless. You know what I mean? This killing seems systematic in our society. In a couple minutes that we have left, how do we change this?
Well, again, it brings us back to the government, because what we're waiting now in Michael Brown cases and many of these cases is, what is the response of the government to this? What is the response of the legal system to it? And those things, such as Trayvon Martin, Rodney King, and so forth, O.J. Simpson, the list goes on. Mm-hmm. The governmental response to these injustices sends a signal to the society as to how black people are valued in the society. And so this is a starting place. How will the government respond to the Michael Brown killing? Will send a signal to police officers all over the country in the power structure. But we have yet to see what that response of the government is.
I hope so. One more thought. This should be of utmost concern for everyone. Things to know. Police in the home. Some citizens may think police officers can enter their homes at any time. However, people have the right to be secure in their homes according to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. The right of the people to be secure in their home, in their persons, homes, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Police do not have a right to arbitrarily look around inside your home, closet, bedrooms, etc. for evidence to use against you in the court of law. They must have a verbal or written consent search, or any emergency situations, or an emergency situation must exist. This has been a wonderful conversation, all right, and hopefully our viewers out there will heed some of the information that we've shared with you, okay, and make this a better world, a better society, because we're all God's children, all right, and like I tell people, all right, civilization started in Africa. That's the cradle of civilization, in my opinion, and millions of other scholars and millions and billions of people around the world, all right? So, we're all brothers and sisters, so let's live in harmony and peace. I want to thank you for appearing on the In My Opinion show, Mr.
Thank you.
Pastor Willingham.
I hope this is not the last time.
No, it will not be.
I hope I didn't say something that you won't invite me back
I'll
again.
invite you back all the time, all right?
Okay. All right, it's been a pleasure.
This is Ronald Robinson and friends saying, for the In My Opinion show, stay focused.